The massive space station hung in the void like a glittering jewel, its crystalline spires stretching 4 kilometers in every direction. The Velthera had built it as a monument to their superiority over the lesser species of the galaxy.
Out today.
It would serve as humanity's first courtroom. Commander Huiyanwu felt the artificial gravity shift as their small diplomatic shuttle docked with the station. Through the porthole, he could see the geometric perfection of Velthera architecture. All sharp angles and impossible curves that hurt to look at directly. His reflection stared back from the reinforced glass, a stocky human in a simple blue uniform. Surrounded by technology that made Earth's best starships look like children's toys. "Remember the briefing?" he whispered to his team as the airlock cycled open. "We're here to prove humanity deserves a place in the galactic community. Stay calm, stay professional, and let me do the talking." Behind him, 12 of Earth's finest arranged themselves in formation. Soyoung, his chief engineer, checked her tablet one final time. Minho, the mining specialist, straightened his collar nervously. Young Janae, barely 25, but already a master of xenobiology, clutched her sample cases like precious treasures. These weren't soldiers or diplomats, they were workers, scientists. People who built things rather than destroyed them. The corridor beyond the airlock stretched impossibly high, its walls made of some transparent material that seemed to bend. Light itself. Floating platforms carried various alien species through the air, their forms so bizarre that Huiyanwu's mind struggled to process them. Tentacled beings that moved like living liquid. Insectoid creatures with too many eyes. Something that looked like a walking tree made of metal. But it was the Velthera that commanded attention. They stood 3 meters tall, their bodies composed entirely of living crystal that caught and refracted the station's light into rainbow patterns. Each one was unique, some angular like cut diamonds, others flowing like frozen water. Their faces, if they could be called faces, were geometric arrangements of faceted surfaces that somehow conveyed expression through the play of light within. The escort drone led them through corridors that defied physics, past chambers where gravity seemed to flow sideways in rooms where the ceiling was actually a portal to open space. Other species gave the human delegation curious looks, some dismissive, others merely puzzled. It was clear that humanity was the newest arrival to this cosmic community. The council chamber was a sphere suspended in the center of the station, accessible only by floating platforms that moved without visible means of propulsion. As they ascended, Huiyanwu caught glimpses of the galaxy through transparent sections of the walls. Thousands of ships moved between the stars, representing civilizations that had been exploring space since before humans had discovered fire. Inside the Chamber 7, massive Velthera awaited in formation. Their crystalline bodies pulsed with internal light, creating a display that was both beautiful and intimidating. The largest, whose faceted form seemed to contain an entire aurora, spoke first. "I am High Counselor Vekfar of the Velthara hegemony." The voice came from everywhere at once. Translated by technology that converted their light-based communication into audible words, "We have reviewed the reports from our scouts regarding your species." The other council members shifted, their bodies chiming like wind chimes as crystal touched crystal. Huiyanwu could hear them communicating in frequencies that made his teeth ache and his bones vibrate. Whatever they were saying, it wasn't complimentary. "Humans of Earth," Vekfar continued. "You have requested membership in the Galactic Mining Consortium. Our evaluation teams have studied your species extensively." A holographic display materialized in the air, showing detailed scans of human anatomy. "You possess no natural armor plating, no energy manipulation organs, no psionic abilities, no biological weapon systems. Your technology is approximately 4,000 years behind current galactic standards." Soyoung's fists clenched at her sides, but she kept her expression neutral. Huiyanwu could feel the tension radiating from his team. These were people who had spent their lives pushing the boundaries of human knowledge, only to be dismissed as primitives. "Your lifespans are tragically brief," another council member added, its voice like the sound of breaking glass. "Your physical strength is below average for galactic species. Your reproductive rate suggests you are not even an apex species on your own world." Murmurs rippled through the assembled aliens watching from the gallery. Some sounded amused, others merely bored. Humanity was apparently not the first species to be evaluated and found wanting. However, the Kvaris tone shifted slightly. Our scouts report that you have certain useful characteristics. You appear capable of working in environments that would challenge our automated systems. Your manual dexterity exceeds most species of similar size. Hyan Wu stepped forward, keeping his voice steady despite the humiliation. Burning in his chest, "Honored council members, we may not possess your advanced capabilities, but humans have always excelled at adapting to challenges. We've survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, and global wars. We've learned to thrive in the harshest environments our world could offer." The crystalline beings exchanged more of their musical communication. Finally, the Gavar spoke again. "We will offer you a probationary contract. Mining Station Keth 7 in the Outer Rim requires extraction of lithium crystals from unstable asteroid. Fields the work is dangerous and requires expendable labor. Consider it a test of your species' utility." The words hit like a physical blow. Expendable. They weren't being offered partnership. They were being offered the chance to die for alien profit. But Hyan Wu smiled and bowed slightly. "We accept your generous offer. High Counselor, you won't regret giving humanity this opportunity." So the human delegation was escorted toward their assigned transport. None of the Velthera noticed the quiet competence in how they moved. They missed the way each human instinctively covered their teammates' blind spots. How they communicated with subtle gestures developed over years of working in dangerous environments. They saw primitive bipeds where there were actually apex predators who had clawed their way to the top of one of the galaxy's most hostile worlds. The greatest mistake in galactic history was about to unfold. Born from the arrogance of beings who had forgotten that sometimes the most dangerous creatures are the ones that don't look dangerous at all. The asteroid mining station Keth 7 floated in the darkness between dying stars. Its industrial bulk, scarred by 6 weeks of continuous operation. Inside the cramped living quarters, Hyan Wu studied the geological reports on his tablet, surrounded by the constant hum of life support systems and the distant rumble of mining equipment. The humans had adapted to their new home with typical efficiency, turning cold metal corridors into something resembling civilization. The artificial dawn cycle had just begun when the klaxons screamed to life. The sound cut through the station like a knife, sending every human scrambling from their bunks. Hyan Wu's combat instincts kicked in immediately. He'd heard similar alarms during the resource wars on Earth, when enemy forces had broken through the defensive lines. His tablet clattered to the floor as he sprinted through the narrow corridors, dodging other workers who were rushing to emergency stations. The command center was chaos. Holographic displays flickered with data streams that made no sense to human eyes, while the station's Velthora overseer Zilthan moved frantically between control panels. The alien's crystalline body pulsed with rapidly changing colors, something Hyan Wu had learned meant extreme agitation. "What's the situation?" Hyan Wu demanded, his voice cutting through the noise. Zilthan, his faceted head turned toward him, light refracting through his transparent features in patterns that hurt too. "Look at directly." Sensor grid detected massive spatial distortion. Dimensional breach forming in Sector 77 Alpha. The holographic display zoomed in on a section of empty space where reality itself seemed to be tearing open. Through the rift, something vast and dark was moving. Keth's swarm, Zilthan's voice cracked with a frequency that made the human's bones ache. "Estimated breach completion in 47 hours. Advanced scouts will arrive much sooner." The words hit the assembled humans like a physical blow. Everyone in the galaxy knew about the Keth. They were the nightmare that made other species check their sensors twice before jumping to hyperspace. Insectoid horrors that moved in vast swarms, consuming everything in their path. Entire star systems had gone dark after Keth's encounters, leaving behind nothing but empty space and floating debris. So-Young pushed through the crowd of workers, her engineer's mind already calculating possibilities. How big is the swarm? The display shifted, showing energy readings that climbed steadily upward. The Zilthan form flickered between deep blue and violent red. Initial estimates suggest 12,000 individual units. Classification ranges from Scout Class to... He paused, his voice dropping to a whisper. Queen Class.
Us.
Minho, still wearing his mining gear, stepped forward. What about the defense? Grid? This station has to have some kind of protection. Mining stations are not military installations, Zilthan replied. We have minimal shielding and no weapon systems. Standard protocol is immediate evacuation to secure positions. As if summoned by his words, the communication system crackled to life. All Velthera personnel report to Docking Bay 3 for immediate evacuation. Repeat all essential personnel to Docking Bay 3. The humans looked at each other with growing unease. Young Janae raised her hand tentatively. What about us? When do we evacuate?
Zildan do da no da zildan do da 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 do da do da do da do da do da do da da do da 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 da
Evacuation. Protocols prioritize essential personnel first. Secondary transport vessels will be dispatched once primary evacuation is complete. How long? Minho's voice was deadly quiet. 72 hours for secondary transport arrival? The silence that followed was deafening. Every human in the command center understood the mathematics of death approaching. The Keth would arrive in 47 hours. Their evacuation wouldn't come for 72. The numbers didn't lie. Around the room, faces showed the same realization. Young Su, barely out of university, stared at the display in shock. Dong Heian, a veteran miner with 30 years of experience, closed his eyes and took a deep breath. G1, the station's medical officer, was already calculating how many wounded they could treat with their limited supplies. Then we hold the station, Haiyan Wu said quietly. The words seemed to hang in the air like a challenge to fate itself. Zilthan's crystalline form sparked with colors that had no human equivalent. His alien features somehow conveying disbelief. Possible. The overseer's voice rose in pitch. Humans cannot fight the Keth. You lack the necessary biological adaptations for combat. No natural armor, no energy weapons, no psionic abilities. The Keth are perfect predators. They have evolved specifically to hunt and kill other species. But Haiyan Wu was already moving, his mind shifting into patterns that had kept him alive. During humanity's bloodiest conflicts, the resource wars had taught him that survival wasn't about being the strongest or having the best weapons. It was about being smarter, more adaptable, and more determined than whatever wanted to kill you. Minho, he called out, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had led soldiers through hell. I need a complete inventory of all mining explosives. Every charge, every detonator, every gram of industrial explosive we have on this station. The mining foreman nodded grimly and headed for the storage bays. Saw-Young, I need structural assessments of every corridor, every intersection, every weak point in this station's design. If we're going to make a stand, we need to know exactly what we're working with. The engineer was already pulling up architectural blueprints on her tablet. On it, Commander. Janae, gather everything we have that could be used as weapons or tools, industrial chemicals, cutting torches, anything that might give us an edge. The young scientist nodded and disappeared into the supply sections. Through the command center's viewports, they could see the first Velthara evacuation ships departing, sleek crystalline vessels that moved through space like living things, carrying their alien builders to safety. The humans watched them go, understanding that they were now truly alone. Zilthan gathered his personal effects with mechanical precision. his alien features unreadable. As he prepared to leave, he turned back to the humans one final time. "You're making a mistake," he said, his translated voice carrying what might have been genuine concern. "The Keth have consumed civilizations far more advanced than yours. They have tactics refined over millions of years of warfare. They will not be stopped by courage alone." Hyenwu looked up from the tactical displays he was studying. "Maybe not. But courage is what we have, so courage is what we'll use." The last evacuation ship disappeared into hyperspace, leaving the mining station floating alone in the darkness. 137 humans remained, surrounded by industrial equipment and mining machinery, facing an enemy that had destroyed star systems, but they were humans. And humans had always been good at turning the impossible into the inevitable. They had survived ice ages and asteroid impacts, global wars and planetary disasters. They had climbed from cave dwellers to starfarers in just a few thousand years. The Keth were about to learn why humanity had never produced a single species that could be classified as prey. The transformation began immediately after the last Velthera ship disappeared into the void. What had been a simple mining station became something else entirely under Hyenwu's tactical eye, a fortress built from desperation and human ingenuity. In the main engineering bay, sparks flew as Sungmin's welding team worked around His team dragged massive support beams across the primary access corridors, creating barriers that would force any attackers into predetermined kill zones. 30 centimeters exactly, Hyenwu called out, measuring the gaps with a laser scanner. "The Keth warriors are insectoid. They'll try to squeeze through any opening they can find. These gaps will funnel them right where we want them." Mining charges were being repurposed with deadly efficiency. What had once been tools for breaking apart asteroids were now becoming improvised explosives. Minho worked with the precision of a master craftsman, his weathered hands steady as he modified detonators and shaped charges. Each explosive was carefully placed to maximize damage while minimizing risk to the station's life support systems. "We blow the wrong section, we all die anyway," he muttered, sweat beading on his forehead despite the station's cool temperature. Better to die fighting than suffocating in the dark. In the processing labs, Donghan's team had transformed refinement equipment into something far more sinister. Industrial pumps that once moved slurry now carried death through hidden pipes running beneath the station's floors. "The Keth have thick carapaces," Donghan explained to his nervous assistants, "but even they can't resist concentrated sulfuric compounds. One breach in their armor, and they're done." Youngsu appeared at every workstation, his youthful face pale but determined. The 19-year-old mineral processor had never held a weapon in his life, but he carried ammunition and supplies with the dedication of a veteran soldier. His hands shook constantly, but he never stopped moving. "I keep thinking about my sister. Back on Earth," he confided to G1 during a brief rest break. "She's only 12. If we don't stop these things here, they might find Earth someday." JI-1, the station's medical officer, had set up a triage center in the cafeteria. But she wasn't just preparing to treat wounds. She was creating weapons. Medical lasers designed for surgery were being modified into portable cutting tools. Anesthetic gases were being concentrated into knockout weapons. Even her medical nanobots were being reprogrammed to serve as tiny saboteurs. Some traditions never change. Soyoung worked in the central hub, transforming the station's computer systems into a tactical nerve center. Mining sensors became early warning systems, or transport tubes were converted into ammunition delivery networks. The station's artificial intelligence, designed to optimize mineral extraction, was now calculating optimal defensive positions and enemy approach vectors. "The Velthora built this place to be efficient," she said, her fingers flying across holographic interfaces. "They just never imagined that efficiency could be turned toward war." As the hours passed, the mining station became unrecognizable. Corridors that had once carried workers and equipment now bristled with improvised weapons and explosive traps. The gentle hum of life support was joined by the whir of weapon systems charging and the distant sound of metal being forged into instruments of death. Hyenwu moved through it all like a conductor orchestrating a deadly symphony. His experience from the resource wars guided every decision, every placement of defensive positions. He had learned that winning wasn't about having superior firepower, it was about using every advantage, no matter how small. "I remember," he addressed. The assembled humans during their final briefing were not trying to win a glorious victory, trying to survive long enough for help to arrive. "That means we fight smart, not hard. Use the station's layout against them. Make them come. To us, on our terms." The perimeter sensors detected the first Keth scouts 18 hours before the main swarm was due to arrive. The creatures moved through space like living shadows, their insectoid forms barely registering on conventional scanners. But human eyes, trained by millions of years of hunting and being hunted, spotted them immediately. "Contact," reported Sang-Ho. From the observation deck, 3 scouts, approaching from the asteroid field. They're huge. Through the reinforced viewports, the humans caught their first glimpse of their enemies. The Keth scouts were each the size of a small shuttle, their bodies covered in what looked like living armor that shifted and flowed like liquid metal. Multiple limbs ended in razor-sharp claws that could carve through hull plating. Their heads were dominated by compound eyes that seemed to see in dimensions humans couldn't comprehend. But it was their movement that truly terrified. They didn't fly through space, they flowed, like predators that had evolved in zero gravity. Every motion was calculated, efficient, deadly. "They're scanning the station," Sa-Young reported from her sensor station. "Mapping our defenses, looking for weak points." One of the scouts approached close enough that they could see details of its alien anatomy. Breathing holes along its sides opened and closed rhythmically. Its compound eyes rotated independently, taking in every angle of approach. Most disturbing of all, its mandibles moved constantly, as if it were already tasting the flesh of its prey. "It's beautiful," Youngsu whispered in horrified fascination. "Like a work of art designed specifically to kill. All art serves a purpose." Hyan-Wu replied grimly. "Their purpose is to end us. Our purpose is to prove them wrong." The scouts completed their reconnaissance and disappeared back into the asteroid field. Soon, they would report to the main swarm. The Keth would know exactly what they were facing, a small group of primitive aliens armed with improvised weapons and desperate courage. What they wouldn't know was that these particular primitives had spent their entire evolutionary history turning disadvantages into advantages. They had survived ice ages by making fire. They had conquered their planet by working together. They had reached the stars by refusing to accept that anything was impossible. The Keth had evolved to be perfect predators, honed by millions of years of consuming other species, but they had never encountered prey that refused to be prey. Had never faced creatures that could look at certain death and respond. By building weapons out of mining equipment and hope, the main swarm was approaching. A dark cloud of death moving between the stars. But inside the mining station, 137 humans waited with the patience of hunters, who had finally found prey worthy of their skills. The greatest predators in galactic history were about to meet the greatest survivors in evolutionary history. Only one species would learn from this encounter. The outer hull breach alarm screamed through the station as the first Keth. Warriors tore through the reinforced plating like it was paper. Hyan-Wu watched from the command center as his motion sensors lit up with dozens of contacts moving through the compromised sections. The creatures flowed through the breach like living nightmares, their insectoid forms perfectly adapted for zero-gravity combat. "Here they come," he whispered into his cum unit. "Remember, patience wins battles, not bravery."
First Keth.
Warrior rounded the corner into Corridor 7 Alpha, its compound eyes scanning for prey. What it found instead was an empty hallway lined with welded support beams. The creature's razor-sharp mandibles clicked with frustration as it squeezed through the 30-centimeter gaps, its armored carapace scraping against the metal barriers. It never saw the mining charges hidden in the wall cavities. Now, Hyan-Wu's voice cut through the chaos. The corridor exploded in a chain reaction of devastating force. Mining charges designed to crack open asteroids tore through alien flesh with horrific efficiency. The lead warrior simply disintegrated, its carapace, fragments embedding in the walls like deadly shrapnel. The three creatures behind it were caught in the secondary explosions, their screams creating frequencies that made the humans' teeth ache. But more kept coming. The second group learned from the first's mistake, approaching more cautiously. They used their acid-spitting capability to dissolve the support beam barriers, creating wider gaps for their passage. But Hyanwu had anticipated this adaptation. Donghain, activate the sprinkler system in Section 7, he commanded. What should have been water for fire suppression was instead concentrated acid from the OR processing equipment. The Keth warriors looked up in confusion as the liquid rained down on them, then began screaming as their own armor dissolved under the chemical assault. Their natural acid resistance meant nothing against industrial compounds designed to break down the hardest minerals in the galaxy. In Section 12, Juwan's team waited in concealed positions as a group of Keth warriors approached. The creatures moved with predatory grace, their multiple limbs allowing them to crawl along walls and ceilings with equal ease. Their compound eyes rotated constantly, searching for hidden threats. Remember, G1 whispered to her nervous team, aim for the joints where their armor is thinnest. Our modified mining lasers can punch through, but only if we hit the right spots. The first creature rounded the corner and immediately took a concentrated laser blast to its primary breathing tube. The beam calibrated for cutting through metallic, or sliced through chitin like butter. The warrior collapsed, its internal fluids leaking onto the station floor in pools of alien ichor. But its death scream brought reinforcements. Second wave incoming, Soyoung's voice crackled over the cum from her position at the sensor array. They're times the size of the first. They're adapting their approach patterns. Nakith had learned that the humans were dangerous and close. Quarters. The second wave brought different tactics. Larger warriors that could smash through barriers. Flying scouts that could bypass corridor defenses, and something new that made Hyanwu's blood run cold. Tunnelers, he breathed, watching. His structural sensors as something began eating through the station's outer hull from multiple directions. They're trying to bypass our defenses entirely. The battle evolved into a deadly game of adaptation versus counter-adaptation. When the Keth brought acid-resistant warriors, the humans switched to explosive-tipped mining darts. When the creatures began using coordinated swarm tactics, Minho's team flooded entire sections with toxic gases from the refineries, forcing them into single-file approaches where they could be eliminated individually. Youngsu proved that courage could overcome inexperience. The 19-year-old mineral processor found himself face-to-face with a Keth warrior in the supply depot when their defensive line was breached. Instead of freezing, he grabbed an industrial welding torch and held his ground. "You want some?" he shouted, his voice cracking with fear and adrenaline. "Come and get it," the warrior lunged, its mandibles snapping shut inches from his face. But Youngsu had learned from watching the others. He aimed for the joints. The welding torch carved through the creature's primary limb joint, severing the appendage in a spray of alien blood. The warrior's second attack was stopped by Sung Min, who appeared from a side corridor with a modified mining rifle. "Good work, kid," the engineer said, helping Youngsu to his feet. "Your sister would be proud." The battle raged for 18 hours without pause. The station's corridors became a maze of destruction, filled with the acrid smell of burning chitin, and the metallic taste of alien blood in the recycled air. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows as humans and Keth warriors fought through sections where gravity failed and atmosphere leaked through combat damage. Several humans had fallen during the fighting. Dongmin, a veteran miner, died holding a breach point long enough for his team to escape. Sujin, barely 22, sacrificed herself to detonate a cluster of charges that eliminated an entire Keth assault group. Their deaths weren't meaningless. Each sacrifice bought time for the others to adapt. To learn to become more effective killers, Hyanwu coordinated the defense from the command center. His tactical experience guiding every decision he moved. Teams like pieces on a chessboard, always staying one step ahead of the Keth adaptation cycle. When they learned to avoid the acid traps, he switched to explosive ambushes. When they developed countermeasures for the laser weapons, he had his. People fall back to prepared positions with different advantages. They're learning faster than I expected, he admitted to Soyoung during a brief lull in the fighting. But they're still thinking like predators. They haven't realized they're fighting survivors. That's when the sensors detected something that changed everything, Commander. Youngsu's voice crackled over the comm system from his position in the outer observation deck. I can see the Queen. She's the size of a shuttlecraft, coming through the main breach, or through the reinforced viewport. They could see her, a massive Keth matriarch, whose presence dwarfed the warriors that had been attacking them. Her carapace was darker than the others, scarred by countless battles. Multiple egg sacs pulsed along her abdomen, suggesting she could spawn new warriors continuously. Most terrifying of all, her movements showed intelligence that the regular warriors lacked. She's coordinating their attacks, Soyoung realized, watching the tactical displays. The regular warriors are just extensions of her will. She's the brain controlling the entire swarm. Hyan-Woo smiled grimly as understanding dawned. The Keth had made their final mistake. They had revealed their center of command, and humans had been hunting pack leaders since they first learned. To throw spears on the African savannah, all teams converge on my position, he commanded, checking his improvised weapons one final time. We end this now. The Queen represented everything the Keth had evolved to become: a perfect predator, adapted by millions of years of consuming other species. But she was about to face something she had never encountered before. Prey that had learned to hunt the hunters. The final confrontation was about to begin. The final assault began when the Ketha Queen herself breached the station's central hub. Her massive form filled the corridor like a living mountain of chitin and rage. She was 3 times larger than her warriors, her carapace scarred by countless battles across the galaxy. Multiple egg sacs pulsed along her abdomen, each one capable of spawning dozens of new warriors. Her compound eyes, each the size of a human head, rotated independently to track every movement in the chamber. Hyan-Woo, he, and his remaining team faced her in the station's main processing center, surrounded by the industrial equipment that had become their weapons. The Queen's presence was terrifying. She radiated an alien intelligence that had consumed entire civilizations. Her mandibles clicked with sounds that bypassed human hearing entirely, communicating directly with the primal fear centers of their brains. She's coordinating the entire swarm through pheromone signals, Soyoung whispered, her voice barely audible over the creature's breathing. Cut off the head and the body dies. The Queen reared back on her hind limbs, preparing to strike. Her acid glands swelled visibly as she prepared to dissolve the humans into digestible components. But Hyan-Woo had spent 18 hours learning how these creatures thought and moved. Oh, he shouted. The trap they had spent the last hour preparing sprang into action. Mining charges hidden throughout the processing center detonated in a carefully timed sequence, not to kill the Queen directly, but to channel her massive form into the exact position Hyan-Woo needed. The explosions drove her back against the main or processor, where the heaviest charges waited. The Queen's death scream shattered equipment throughout the station. It was a sound that contained frequencies from across the electromagnetic spectrum. A final roar of defiance from a species that had never known defeat. Her massive form convulsed as the explosions tore through her carapace. Alien ichor spraying across the walls, in patterns that would haunt the survivors' dreams. But it was what happened next that truly showed the victory's magnitude. Throughout the station, the remaining Keth warriors suddenly stopped their coordinated attacks. The hive mind that had guided them for millions of years was gone, severed by their Queen's death. Some fled immediately, their primitive individual minds overwhelmed by panic. Others simply stood motionless, like biological machines suddenly, unplugged from their power source. Young Dash-Su, his face streaked with blood and soot, lowered his improvised weapon. Is it over? Hyan-Woo slumped against a damaged wall, his makeshift armor cracked and stained with both human and alien blood. Around him, the survivors began to emerge from their defensive positions. Of the 137 humans who had chosen to stay and fight, 93 remained. Each survivor carried wounds that would scar their bodies and memories that would never fade. But they had done something other species in galactic history had accomplished, they had defeated. A Keth swarm in direct combat. The rescue ships arrived 6 hours later, expecting to find only debris and corpses. Instead, they discovered a group of battered humans, methodically cleaning their weapons while standing guard over mountains of alien corpses. The station's critical systems still functioned, the mining equipment remained intact, and the humans were already discussing repairs and improvements. High Counselor Dekfar materialized in the command center, his crystalline form flickering between colors that had no names in human language. His faceted features reflected the destruction around him, creating fractured images of carnage that defied comprehension. How? The single word carried the weight of galactic disbelief. The Keith have consumed entire star systems. They're warriors. Our perfect killing machines evolved over millions of years. How did you survive? Haiyan Wu looked up from cleaning Youngsu's wounds, his eyes reflecting the hardness of someone who had seen too much death in too short a time. You measured us by our individual capabilities. You missed what makes us human, which is, we fight for each other, Haiyan Wu said. His voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had earned the right to speak for his species. Every human who died here bought time for others to live. Every person who adapted their tactics made the whole group stronger. You see individuals where we see family. He stood slowly, his presence somehow filling the damaged command center, despite his human-sized frame. We adapt to any threat because we have to. We survived ice ages and asteroid impacts, global wars, and planetary disasters. We never surrender when our people are counting on us, because surrender means extinction, and humans are too stubborn to go extinct. Dekvar's crystalline form pulsed with patterns that indicated deep thought. Your species lacks natural weapons, advanced technology, biological advantages. You thought we were weak because we're not born with claws or armor, Haiyan Wu interrupted. But humans don't need to be born deadly. We make ourselves deadly when we need to be. We turn mining equipment into weapons, survival instincts into tactical advantages, and fear into fuel for courage. Around the command center, the other survivors nodded. They had transformed from miners and engineers into something else entirely. Warriors who had faced the galaxy's most feared predators and emerged victorious. Not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through the simple human refusal to accept defeat. Saul Young approached with a tablet showing casualty, reports and damage assessments. The station is salvageable. It can be back to full mining operations within 2 weeks, assuming we want to stay, Minho added, his weathered face showing new scars from the battle. We stay, Haiyan Wu said, without hesitation. This is our home. Now, we built it with our blood and defended it with our lives. No one takes it from us. The news of humanity's victory spread through the galaxy at light speed. The Velthora Council convened an emergency session to revise their assessment of the species they had dismissed as primitive laborers. The classification changed overnight, from protected species to strategic alliance priority. Mining Station Keth 7 became the first human-commanded installation in Galactic Council space, with Haiyan Wu appointed as its permanent commander, but the real change was more subtle and far more significant. Word spread through alien civilizations, carried by traders and diplomats, scientists and soldiers. The small, fragile beings from the third planet had accomplished the impossible. They had faced the galaxy's apex predators and won not through superior technology or evolved advantages, but through something far more dangerous. They had the human spirit, the refusal to surrender, the ability to adapt to any threat, and the willingness to sacrifice everything for others. It was a combination that had never been seen before in galactic history, and it changed everything. Species that had ignored humanity suddenly wanted to study them. Military leaders who had dismissed human tactics began incorporating human strategies into their own doctrines. The galaxy realized that the most dangerous predators weren't always the ones with the biggest claws or the strongest armor. Sometimes, the most dangerous predators were the ones that looked harmless until you threaten their family. Heianwu stood in the observation deck of the rebuilt station, watching new human ships arrive with colonists and equipment. The galaxy would never underestimate humanity again. They had learned the hard way that humans didn't need to be born superior. They just needed to be given a reason to fight, and the greatest reason of all was simple: protecting the people they loved. The galaxy would never be the same. The end.